So the recording is now underway. We have, I think, was it 40 some people who are SVP? Let me just get myself to the right page. I think it was over 40. 46. So we'll see exactly how many that turns out to be. It was sort of lots of RSVPs last month, but not that many people showed up. And not all the people who showed up, of course, had problems. There were others, some there just, to learn and to help out, which is terrific, because this is a kind of a collaborative exercise. And so the more people that do that, the better. And I've noticed that people are adding comments after I've implored them to do so, when they've said that they had a useful, session, to put something in the comments for the event page, because it's so encouraging. I mean, there's nothing like a word of mouth style thing, as opposed to, hosts blathering away about how terrific their sessions are. So is there someone who would like to lead us off with a problem to address? Or are we all budding experts, instructors, and such? If anybody's interested in talking about something to do with block themes, sorry, go ahead, Tony.
A quick answer. I'm always cautioned to back up my WordPress site. And could you clarify that? Does that mean just back up the WordPress, or does that mean back up everything that's on my ISP? I don't.
What kind of what system do they use to manage sites at your host? Is it cPanel?
Yes.
Okay. In cPanel, there's something called a backup wizard, an icon for that, and another one that says backup. And I can't tell you that even though I've used cPanel for like 10 years, I'm endlessly confused by the two. But in a nutshell, when you click on the backup one, it says make a backup of the whole thing, a full backup. And that turns out in a cPanel context to be two things. One is the WordPress site itself, meaning the files, right? That's in one package, or one part of the package. And then there's a copy of the MySQL database instance, because those are the two things that give life to a site, in the sense that the content is in the database, plus all kinds of meta information and so on. And the files have the theme and the plugins and the core application stuff to work and so on. And then in the cPanel case, they also provide backups in that full version of account settings, like your hosting account settings, your email forwarders and such, the administrative sort of fluff that is incidental to a site being hosted. And so anyway, you can ignore that, but you can download the full backup, and then you can choose either to do the home or the WordPress files component as one step, and the MySQL database as a second step, or do them both at the same time. But those are the two things that are in, I think, a WordPress export. Like if you go to the WordPress tools, there's the export capability, and you can export your site, and that's essentially the same thing. Yep.
I have a question in that regard. So it sounds like you're saying the default is always to download to my C drive, right?
I'm sorry, download to which?
Download to my C drive, download to my home PC.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what I do is I either download it directly to cloud storage, Google Drive, for instance, or OneDrive, or down to me locally, and then make some note about it or whatever, and then upload it, and then delete the local copy, because these things get pretty big. One thing that I just kind of a mundane tip is that the backup file cPanel creates is in, I guess it sort of depends on the exact way in which files are structured with your host, but a host that I was working on today had what looked like two public underscore HTML folders in the account. One of them, the second one, had all the WordPress files that you were used to seeing. So I don't quite understand what the other one did, but the point being is that at the same level as the public underscore HTML in which WordPress resides, but at that level are those backup files. So they're not actually part of WordPress, but cPanel picks them up. So if you leave a backup or two and then make a third one, you'll get a backup that includes two more backups. And so what you do is you start off at 200 gigabytes or 100 gigabytes or whatever, and then it becomes 300, and then the same day it's like 500. Well, it's backing up backups of backups. So the point is get it out of there and keep it clean. The other thing is that cPanel has that installer for WP called what's it called? Scriptalicious or something? What's that word?
There's
there's two of them, but I mean this one of them sounds like
is one.
Yeah, that's the one I'm referring to.
Are you
It also does backups.
You're talking about Installatron?
No, that's the other one. I'm talking about the Scriptalicious one. Anyway, I only mention it because I happened to notice in this account today under Scriptalicious underscore backup, a backup of 240 megabytes, which I wasn't even aware you would make, or that. So that was a backup perhaps done automatically by the tool, or it's an option in the tool that I just haven't noticed because I don't use that installer to any extent. So anybody have anything to add in terms of doing backups? We didn't talk about backup plugins, which have some distinct advantages. One of them being backing up your site or whatever site you're doing to the cloud storage directly, and not bothering, as I sometimes do, with the intermediate stage of a local download and then an upload to cloud storage. So that's handy. I think even some of the ones like, well, let's put it this way. Virtually all the backup plugins will offer save to cloud storage, but they also offer scheduled backups, which can be on a sort of a schedule of dates, or they could be like every day at a certain time, that kind of thing. So a lot more features and control. What I actually would like to move to is backing up my sites that I'm directly responsible for, in the sense of either mine or associates, backing up the file systems using Carbon Copy Cloner, which is a Mac utility that's very highly regarded. And the advantage is that it makes incremental backups. So you make your first backup, and then each backup thereafter is only changing what's new or added or subtracted.
Yeah, I've read.
So it's much faster, and you can run it. I have, like, for example, two external SSDs, really inexpensive ones, and so my backup utility runs and backs things up, and you set a sort of minimum free space for a given backup that runs. And so it keeps adding to that and doesn't delete files that you've deleted until it bumps into that limit. And in my case, it was like 25 gigabytes was the minimum free space. So it purges, deletions when it needs a space. And so there's more even in the backup than you might think, but that's just such a superior way. I'm not sure if anybody know of a backup plugin that does incremental backups, because that just seems so much smarter. And there is an open source tool that's used, in many backup programs, rsync. And so you wouldn't even, the mechanism itself already exists. So that's like, nobody has to invent anything. Any comments?
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem with incremental backups is it works for your files. It will not work for your database.
Yes, agreed. And so, I mean, is there a way? Is there a way? I mean, there's Delicious Brains plugin specifically for backing up databases, WordPress databases. And I just noticed it a couple days ago and haven't had a chance to look at it, but I wonder if that can do scheduled backups to some remote location, because that would be super handy, wouldn't it, to be able to.
Of course, you have
Plus,
the
those
you gotta-
MySQL databases are relatively speaking quite small to
yeah,
what we're used to.
You've got to look at where you're backing up to as well.
Yep.
By far the most straightforward way, of course, is to back it up to your ISP, which you were talking about earlier. And so you're going to probably wind up paying for, if you have a large site, you're probably going to wind up paying for space somewhere. So you need to think through, because I have two big sites, and you have to think through where you're going to store your backups.
Sure.
Uh,
Mind you, at the price that OneDrive charges for a terabyte, and then less per terabyte as it increases, I think storage is pretty much sort of changed in its nature. I mean, of the half a dozen different cloud storage, services that I use, one of them is iCloud, which is the most expensive by far at $1.29 or $1.30 a month for 50 gigabytes. But the key to iCloud is that if you're an Apple, if you succumb to the Apple brand, let's put it that way, you might have, as I do, 5 or 6 Apple devices working at the same time. iCloud is the nexus for them all to share and exchange information. And even though I think Google offers some comparable, services, like, for example, they'll do your photos from an iPhone and a desktop machine and do the same job that iCloud does. But I think the more of a concern needs to be towards the limitations of Google Drive and OneDrive and iCloud. And if any of you guys are Mac users or iOS users, there's a guru in the blogging world named Howard Oakley, and he writes quite extensively and authoritatively on those subjects. Anyway, his comments on iCloud and the problems that people experience with the way it synchronizes and works make me really feel queasy about depending on it, but there's really no alternative. So I think that's kind of a special case. Drew, what do you do storage-wise in the cloud?
I have a couple of different backup strategies that I use. I sometimes use a host backup on SiteGround, which is okay. It has the disadvantage that it only allows backing up to SiteGround. You can't actually export you can't download a backup to your own PC, and you can't take it off the SiteGround server. The other thing I do is a WordPress plugin called Updraft Plus, and back up to a cloud service like Dropbox.
That's what I do.
Yeah, Dropbox has just recently changed its pricing, hasn't it? In the last 2 or 3 months? Is that correct, or am I?
Don't know. I'm on the free plan.
Right. So I've been on the free plan since the Dropbox arrived, and it still is. It works flawlessly for the limited role that I have at play, and so I'm happy to have it. But I think it depends. I mean, there are issues with the way Google Drive works, and the fact that there is always risk in cloud storage. risk in the sense of file corruption and so on, even though they blather endlessly about how it doesn't occur. So that's why anything really valuable to me, I want at least a selection of backups on my own drives. If only because a gigabyte now goes for what, $70 in an SSD. And if you're a low level of usage, like you're not writing to it very often, the limitations of SSDs don't arise.
I guess if you're extra paranoid, you could have 2 cloud services or even 3.
Yeah, well, that's why I have a half a dozen, because no, I don't use them in a duplicative way, but I consider their reliability and ease of use, and use them accordingly. So, for example, OneDrive, I park stuff that is going to be there for years before it ever matters, or I clean it out. Google Drive, much more recent stuff, but it's also still under my free limit, which is like 17 gigabytes or something. I tried Google One and was just entirely unimpressed. For the price of 100 gigabytes or something, it had a silly price. It was way too much. But I guess leaving to us, basically it's backup with plugins is the way to go if you want to manage the process and get out of the tedium of having to remember and keep track of things.
One advantage of having an automatic backup running is that it takes care of the problem of automatic updates on your site, wrecking your site, which doesn't happen that often anymore, but still can occasionally happen.
Personally, I turn off auto update both for theme and plugins, and so I suppose I think they force the security updates on you. I'm trying to remember. You can't turn off auto update for security, but then I think they're quite careful with those. I just like to know when a change in plugins or theme is occurring, so that like I'm there and then I see the change and I'm there when it's over, so that if I want to back up, or I know when last backup was, and what I did between then and now isn't of consequence, or I have notes or whatever. So cowboy it kind of thing. But I think that you're right that if you're on auto update, you could be caught, with an update that makes changes that you don't particularly like. Speaking of which, here's a question that I have, even though I read the documentation on auto save and the way in which, when exactly a save occurs in the course of one's work. I know how to turn off revisions, because in most cases the content you're producing doesn't have any real value in revision tracking. Or you can turn it on selectively, which seems to be a better idea. But I don't know if anybody has any experience with the autosave mechanism. Speak up, but otherwise, anybody else have a contribution in terms of backup stuff or plugins for it?
You've got a chat question from somebody.
Okay, where's my chat? Is there a list of items we're discussing today? No, backup just happened to be what we started on because nobody indicated they were ready, 10 minutes ago with a problem or issue, but I'd be happy to start in with.
Robin, excuse me. I posted this site here called forshared.com.
Yep.
And you can throw files on there, and I don't know, and it's for free, so there's no cost. And I just wondered if anybody had any experience or heard of it even. forshared.com.
And who provides it?
Pardon me?
Did you say it was your site or that you use?
No, it's a site. I have some files there, and I'd wonder, because there's no cost, I'd like to throw my my site on it. But I don't know if it's a safe place, if it's reliable, or if it's
well, you've heard that internet saying that if the product doesn't have a price, then your data is what they're getting paid in. And personally, I wouldn't want a free space to get free space unless it was from a gold-plated, well-known brand, of AWS or Google or something. I mean, obviously, I have free Google space. I use free Dropbox space and so on, but they're so well established. But if you don't know who's providing it, I would be very, very leery. If you're willing to plow through all that terms and conditions of use and privacy policies and so on, and satisfy yourself that everything's cool, sure. But nobody in their right mind. And then when it's all said and done, they just lie anyway. Lots of people who provide free services to scam. Whatever they put in those documents really doesn't make any difference because they don't follow it. And nobody catches them, right?
That's good advice. Thank you.
Okay. Daljinder Gill had a question in the chat about real estate plugins and specifically IDX plugins for connection to real estate listings and for displaying real estate listings.
Thank you so much for introducing me. My name is Gill. Everybody calls me Gill. I just make it easy.
Okay.
I got a long Indian name, so I make it easy. I keep the Canadian portion. It's called Gill.
Okay.
My question is, I've been in real estate for the last 40 years. I've been there, done that. So let's not get into that. But I've seen that there are big changes coming. For any realtor who is on this scene will know there are big changes coming in the Real Estate Act. And December 1st, we have a launch of the new and modified act called TRESA. So there are changes on how supplies, services are being offered. And a lot of changes interchanging is going to happen. The forms that we normally use in real estate are changing to encompass to bring in the new act, and it just changes. Real Estate Council of Ontario is having their hands full because they're going to be enforcing the act and so on and so on. So a whole bunch of things changes. But leaving that aside, I need to know why is it that the feed that we can get, the real estate feed that we can get from OREA, who is the Ontario Real Estate Association, or the feed we can also get from the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Now it's called, used to be called TREB, but it's now called TREB. Why is it that the feed that we get from there cannot be fed easily, or there's no add-ons in WordPress to allow that particular feed to be transformed into web pages, especially when you're using web pages from provided by somebody who's made that with real estate themes inside. Where you can go there, list your listings, they can show you listings.
So you search for plugins to do the IDX work?
I have done umpteens of them, and they are so controlled that there are only a handful of
right,
website
but
people.
You are aware that there's a big distinction between the jurisdiction of Ontario and the 50 states, all of which have, all of which have their own regulatory sort of systems.
Okay. That's right.
But when I was involved in some real estate that involved IDX, which was like 5 years ago or 4 years ago, there were at least 20 or 25 states where you could buy a package which would deliver the data in a very convenient form and would be no problem because it's an XML standard sort of format, or probably now JSON.
Okay.
So the providers of this data also provided the connection to put it on a website, to display it, to customers and so on. And it's searchable and all the rest of the stuff. I mean, it's just a data feed in the same way that we're familiar with in many other respects, but it's because it's American and therefore their competition laws are such that they can do this. Now, nobody offered those facilities in the time period that I was talking about in Ontario, because you couldn't legally use that data to display it to the public other than in some very limited form, like 3 or 4 or 5 data points out of 50 or something. Not really very practical, right?
No,
But it was reasonably straightforward to sign up for the data and get access to it. And so if this is a way to make money from your point of view, like if there's money to be made by having this data at your fingertips, then, I would look to try to find an Ontario-based developer who recognizes an opportunity. And if the data is becoming usable if they change the law, which allowed them to restrict the use of the data to make it more wide open, then there'll be people who will, for WordPress in particular, being so many sites that have real estate activity in them, the developers will produce plugins like one a week. If this change is coming in December and it affects the competitive sort of leveling amongst the associations that up to now were anti-competitive, right? They were strictly regulated monopolies, which has broken down over the last 10 years. And I don't know, because I'm not involved anymore, maybe the coming December changes will have further impact on their ability to control this data, which is so essential to, buying and selling properties, right? That's the mother lode of data.
Where it comes to, Robin, thanks. Where it comes to the amount of data that we are allowed by the Toronto Real Estate Board, or be it the Ontario Real Estate Board Association, or realtor.ca, which is across Canada, we don't have an issue. There is no issue there, because the data that they feed you is international level. It's the same level as the US, but it's not US data. It's just local.
Right. But you're saying that nobody yet has provided a simple and straightforward way in the manner of what a plugin normally does for WordPress. Right. Just put it in, then you provide your license and a URL for the API.
Yes,
and you're like done. In fact, when we set up a test using one of the American providers just to see how it would work, because the application we were developing was a method of managing open houses. And the front end of it was a search engine to find the open houses in, a given neighborhood or price range or type of dwelling or whatever. So this data was essential to sort of making that search engine useful. But we were running into those constraints in terms of what we could do with it. And so it wasn't really a feasible way to go about things. Although the change was in the offing, it wasn't happening right then. And if you're familiar with startups, you really can't wait around.
That's true.
Or time to pass. But so what I'm saying is that if there's money on the table, there's money to be made from this data, then that's one thing developers are keen to identify and pursue, right? If somebody could sell 1,000 plugin licenses because they were the first guys out with IDX for the Toronto board, wouldn't that be a good business proposition?
Yeah. So, Robin, what does it take to become one of those people?
A developer?
To become a developer or work with a developer. I've been doing this for the last 2 months.
Right.
I cannot find anybody who knows this stuff.
A developer is first and foremost a programmer, or has programming skills, I guess. And so from my point of view, that's not something that I've ever wanted to be or have any real ability in, or at least never having tried it. I don't know what ability I have, but it's not on my particular horizon. It's not likely to be yours unless you just want to go back to school for 3 or 4 years. It so happens that the programming, one of the core languages that WordPress was built with, PHP, is considered one of the easiest to learn. And then JavaScript comes along, and it has not as difficult a learning curve as a number of other programming languages. In any event, you're saying, well, where do I find a plugin developer? I think the easiest way is just to Google, plugin developers, Toronto, or post to a Facebook group page for Canada or the Toronto area. The other thing is, there's a fellow whose name is Paul Bearne, Bearne. And of the various developers that I'm aware of, he's probably the most in the traditional sort of style of developers, like who's got hardcore technical knowledge, programs 99% of the time, as opposed to doing other things or project management or whatever. Anyway, if you were to Google him, because I don't have his, well, I can look for his, see if I have his email address. But anyway, you could email him and say, I'm interested in hiring or working with, collaborating with a developer for a plugin, for this real estate IDX data. Can you give me any suggestions as to a good place to look? Now there's, Drew, do you remember the name of that? There's freelance marketplace. Is it Code something or other?
Codable?
Codable. Yeah, that's where Paul Bearne gets much of his work, he tells me. And so you don't go there to save money so much as to get more choice and selection and get somebody whose price is sort of commensurate with their skills. So the way that works is that generally the more you pay, not only is the quality better, but it's much faster. So I wouldn't look for the cheapest. I'd look for somebody who's got sort of the kind of experience that you think would be relevant to this. But anyway, I would think any advice or direction that Paul would give, and he runs the Kingston WordPress Meetup. So he won't take a kind of a question out of the blue, or just say that you were at the Toronto meetup and Robin suggested that that you ask him about this.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me, Drew, if you want to take over for 2 minutes, I'll just look up Paul's email address.
Okay, just looking through the chat here. So there's a message from Jillian Harris. It's about help with, I think it was with divi. Yeah, custom theme using the divi builder and changing something.
I can talk, that helps.
Oh, yes, that does help a lot.
Okay. We've created a new page and we're having trouble linking it to the main drop-down menu. So like the main drop-down menu is at the top. It's still linking to our old page and I want it to link to a new page, and I'm not quite sure where in the divi builder to find it. The only place I've been able to find menus listed is under appearance, where it will let me change the order of the menu and what the menu says, but it won't let me change the link location.
Interesting. So is the what happens if you try and change the link location in there?
I can't even find where it will let me do that.
Interesting. Unfortunately, I'm not a divi user.
Okay.
Well,
and it's a very old website that's been updated over time, and now a website management company kind of oversees it, and I was hired last year to fix it. So that's kind of where
there is a divi specific meetup.
Okay, wonderful.
Which just escapes me right now as to what city it's in. Could well be it's somewhere in California, probably LA. But if you look up, if you Google, or not Google, if you in Meetup search for divi, then and it comes up LA, Sacramento, or whatever sort of California city, then I would check that first. And they have clinic-like sessions like this one for WP. They do specifically, and that's their whole thing is the divi theme.
Okay.
There may well be more, just as, for example, under Elementor, there's the sort of official Elementor meetups, but then there are unofficial ones, or just ones that people organize. So with the use of Zoom for these meetups, you can attend meetups anywhere in the world. I mean, North America obviously makes more sense. But that's definitely a good place to go for resources. And is there not a community forum for Divi users as well? Given how big Divi is, I'm sure there would be a forum somewhere where you could post a question. In fact, I mean, it's worth sitting down and sort of carefully composing the problem and then posting that in a forum, posting that, as a comment to the Divi meetup page, when the clinic is coming up. And then that way you're sure to get something dead on pretty quickly. If your description of the problem enables a knowledgeable user to tell you, then it's definitely that's why the time spent can be worth it. If somebody says, yeah, I figured that, or I know how to go about that, or, that kind of thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Well, the next question is from Nithya Aravind.
Hello.
Hi, wants to know about becoming a full-time blogger as a career.
Yeah.
Robin, do you remember the name of, is it somebody Rouse? Is it Brandon Rouse? Who's the Rouse? I'm trying to think of his blog. There's a blog called problogger.com. And
Okay.
he's really the authority on this. And if you if you go to problogger.com and follow his blog, and he has I know he's probably has a podcast and a YouTube channel and all that, but that's his thing. And he probably even has a course too.
Sure. Thank you. Another doubt I have, if I have 3 pages in my blogging website, at the bottom of it, if you see, there is an edit button over there.
Sorry, at the bottom, there's what?
Edit button.
Well, that's not good. Can you show us the page?
Yeah, sure. Just a second, please.
What area or what topics would you blog on?
I blog on, just a second. I blog on personal topics and about festivals we celebrate back in India,
right?
And blog places we travel.
Right.
From Toronto out from back in India.
Because if you want to earn from blogging, it's pretty much all about what kind of an audience can you offer to advertisers or sponsors, because those are the people that pay. Let's say those are people who pay without dictating what the topic or content is going to be. Like you can hire somebody as a writer, right? That's straightforward.
Yeah.
But if somebody's supporting through advertising a site for its content, well, then the topics and the audience need to be something they can relate to. So, for example, travel companies, whether they're providing travel services or travel agents or travel advisors or, travel insurance or whatever, then if you're traveling all over the place and you're writing about it, then the people who are your audience will be people who are planning on traveling, or at least would like to travel, if only in their dreams. But you can see, though, from what I'm saying, that it's your ability to say, my audience of X hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people have these characteristics and therefore make a good fit for a company, doing whatever. Anyway, so let's show us that page and we'll figure out what
just a second, please. Just a second. See, there is a edit button at the bottom before the footer.
Yeah. Well, isn't that weird?
Well,
click on it. What happens? What happens when you click on it?
It takes me to the draft page where I have to edit. If I need to edit the page, it takes me there inside.
Now, is this is this page published?
Yeah. It's a home page in my website.
Yeah, now you're logged in, so that's probably it's probably allowing you to edit because you're logged in. if you were to look
Yeah.
at this page in
Oh yeah, because look at the sorry to interrupt, Drew, but this is the WordPress client, right?
Yeah.
So
In
it well have been added by by this reader, rather than in the page itself, because this is a WordPress sort of this is a what do you call it? Automatic, piece of work.
Oh.
This WordPress client, so they can do things in WordPress that nobody else can because they sort of own it, at least in a manner of speaking.
if you were to look at this as another user would see it who's not logged in, they probably wouldn't see this. And you can simulate that by using what's called an incognito window in your browser. And you'll see that in the options if you click on your browser icon, or right click on your browser icon. One of the options will be to open an incognito window, and you can look at your website without being logged in, and you'll see it as regular users will see it.
Oh, okay.
Well, the other thing is to view the page without using this WordPress client, because that will indicate whether this is part of the WordPress
Yeah, it's
page
gone.
or
It's
part of
gone.
the
Right.
client.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that only you see that, and only you see it, and only when you're logged in. So that's just for
Oh,
you.
yeah. Right. Correct. Right.
But is that the case though? I mean, if we conclude that, or whether being logged in and having admin privileges or whatever, then the reader adds this edit button.
Oh, yeah. I thought it will be visible for everyone so that people might change this thing, whatever I write about.
No, it's handy.
But
It's
it's
handy
fine. Now
when
it's
you're.
fine.
I mean, this is a blog reader, meaning that any site which you have a connection to will be available in the sidebar on the left, plus blogs you follow, right? So if it's a WordPress
Yeah.
blog, in Timbuktu or whatever, and you follow it, well, it'll be in that reader. You can click on it and read it. But when it's your content, then it has the additional feature of letting you edit the content actually, and you can add pages and posts and do other things about the basic setup of a page. What is it, 5 or 6 things that you do when you create one of those items? You can do all that in this client, which for some people is really handy because there's none of that sort of stuff in the sidebars and the toolbar and all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
how they handle the block, theme, block, and the use of blocks must be a version of what we now use directly. I mean, this doesn't invent this stuff. The editing process is just using the block editor, right?
Yeah, right. Correct.
So it's a convenience, but I'm curious just to confirm that it is I think they call it a reader, but it's more than that. Whether this is a feature of the reader, because I doubt if you'll find anything on the page displayed which reflects an edit button.
Yeah. Now it is gone. Incognito mode, it's not there. It only gets displayed when I log in.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine.
All right. So you're in good shape now. That was your one question in that regard.
Yeah, that was the question, but yeah.
Okay. So where do we get to, Drew? Who's next? I put Paul Burns' email and phone number in a message there. Now, this Mike Mattos says, Jillian, you use the word link, and typically in WordPress, you don't add a link to the menu. You add /delete a page and move it around. So did you mean you wanted to change a URL link or to have a menu load a different WP page? Well, I find that's a confusing answer.
Robin, this was in answer to the question earlier where the questioner asked the question, how do I change my menu so I get a different page opening? But I noticed she specifically used the word link. referring to a page. And this kind of upset me because generally WordPress, you don't change URLs in a WordPress menu. You point to a different page.
Right, but what you're getting is the URL, right?
Yes, but it's applying it for you. But you have to add the page.
Right. But
You
what I'm
have to
saying
add
though
the
is that
page to the menu.
it's the right term, but it depends on the person understanding that what they're working with directly is at the URL, unless it's an external URL.
Yeah.
Right, which then shows as such.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I was just wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
As I say, as a novice, it took me a long time to realize that I was adding pages, and they were at the bottom of 50 or 60 pages in a menu, right? And I'd have to scroll, and there it is. And now you've got to drag it up, to be at the top. And that's whereas I thought I could just go to the top and change that line and put in the name of the page I wanted, but it didn't actually work that way.
Unfortunately, the person who asked the question originally is no longer on the call.
Yeah.
Okay. Owen asks, is there any way to use WordPress offshore servers to avoid being identified as a Canadian site and therefore having Canadian news from traditional media blocked? I realize that may involve some violations, blah, blah, blah. Is there a loophole in WordPress being identified strictly with the country of the client? Personally, I wasn't aware that other than social media platforms, nobody else was going to be hit or restricted in their use of Canadian news content. It was Twitter and Facebook and so on saying, we're going to change the way in which references to news content is made, and we're going to take out 3/4 of the value of what you've been doing in the process. But is your thought, Owen, that would apply to any Canadian website? Or do we not have Owen here?
As far as where you host your website, a lot of the larger web hosts will give you a choice of where you want your server located. You can a lot of them will give you a choice of, say, the United States or the European Union, for example, for websites that require EU data residency for GDPR reasons. So yeah, a lot of the larger hosts will give you your choice of server location.
Is Owen, are you there, Owen? He's still listed under as being here. Owen?
Yes.
Aha.
Yeah.
Have you been having a nap?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Well, two things. Drew's point is that larger hosting companies offer a variety of countries, depending on how big they are. Sizable ones will offer 8 or 10 different countries, which will have different regulatory regimes. Like, for example, the countries in Europe, they'll offer a couple of them. When I was shopping for a VPN, one of the countries available to use was Finland. And Finland's regarded as having by far the toughest privacy laws. So if you have data that you want protected, or at least you think data protection is useful, then I would, the Finnish server, it's the same price. And in the networking, in the internetworking of the internet, distance is not really a concern. Although I wouldn't say that would be the case if there were some really big world event taking place. So that's one point, but I think the other point is that it's not my understanding that any ordinary website, like put up a WordPress website and put some news on it, I'm certainly not going to be the slightest bit restricted in my use of news content in any site that I'm involved in, because so far as I'm aware, this regulation does not extend beyond very large social media platforms. All right, shall we move on then? Offshore web hosting WordPress site. So is Rambod, are you still here? Rambod, your audio and video is off. Rambod? Anybody there? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes. Are you familiar in any respect with the Bill C11, C or C18? Rambod?
I am quite familiar with the Bill C11, C18. There's a lot going on with regards to the news and media being censored.
Yes.
In
The question before us right now is does the control of the use or regulation of the use of news content apply to every Tom, Dick, and Harry website in Canada?
I believe
Or
it. I
is it
believe
targeting,
it does.
is it targeting large social media platforms, as I think?
I mean, if you want to get into a perspective like that, it's like the legislation was, I don't know if it was C11 that was targeting like Instagram and Facebook blocking news sites. However, I think with the current the situation with the legislation is that they want to regulate all, the Canadian government wants to regulate all news content. And that even, I just heard reports that even Google is blocking like access to Canadian news links.
Yeah, but I don't, I think it's a mistake to equate Google with the websites that we're involved with. I think Google's rather larger, rather more complex, rather more sophisticated, and definitely incredibly wealthier than we are. I think the whole targeting process of this news content regulation is billion-dollar plus companies who run social media platforms. I don't think there's been a breath of suggestion, because I think I've heard about it if they were planning on taking 50,000 websites and saying no longer can you use news content. I don't think that was ever the goal of the thing, was not to eliminate news content use, but to get people to pay for it. And the reason why they thought that would work was because they were only talking to Google, Facebook, and their client sort of businesses, right? They can afford to pay it, number one. Number two, enforcing that by regulation, meaning forcing mediation, forcing agreements to be made, forcing payments to be made, would only work with a handful of companies. If they tried to do it with 50,000 websites, I think they'd have a riot. You know, I think they'd all lose their jobs really quickly. So, Mike, were you going to comment?
Yeah, it struck me that if you go to Google and you try to find the latest Raptors information at the Toronto Star, you hit the Toronto Star paywall. But if you go to some other sites and you try to find that story, it goes straight into the story without hitting the paywall. And I think this was initially the intent of the bill, was to stop the companies from defeating the paywall by them showing the story without going to the Toronto Star website and the paywall. Because I know you can put a link to pretty much anything, a window in any website. And
yeah, I think that would be a sort of secondary aspect of the mechanics of the regulatory process.
Yeah,
that when you're regulating something and you're trying to make a certain behavior or way of things the rule, is that you also want to close off the ways people can escape the regulation or defeat it. And so what you're talking about now would be the sort of way that you could defeat it. But I think the key point is just like the same issue arises with privacy matters in Ontario, for example, is that even at the worst, that there's some application of privacy or data protection or news content or whatever, practically speaking, it would be, you have a much higher chance of being struck by lightning than by anybody caring about what you're doing in that in either of those regards.
Hang on.
At least that's my experience of a number of these situations. Anyway, not to kill this thing about news, but clearly nobody has any specific idea about the scope of the effect in terms of who would be regulated in this regard. My opinion is primarily just from my experience of the legal system, the way it works, and just following the discussions, which have all involved companies like Facebook and Google. There has not been a single instance of, I don't know, at least 20 or 30 articles I've read, where any website owner other than those guys had an opinion. And don't you think that the Star and the Globe would report if all of the websites in Canada were suddenly regulated in this specific respect and had fines to pay and news content fees to pay and so on? Wow, I think it would be it'd be serious news. I mean, Google and Facebook would certainly make that news available.
And all of the major hosting providers, and most of the major ones are American, and so if you use one of the larger providers, your site's likely going to be hosted in the United States anyway.
But I think it's the fact that it's news content and that you're a Canadian owner that would catch you. And if in fact the regulation covered that situation, being in the States wouldn't matter. Because that's what we all know about the internet, right? You can be anywhere on the planet, but do business in Canada. So what the Europeans have decided is that it doesn't matter where you're located, it's where you're doing business. So in Germany, for example, they don't have their servers there necessarily, but they're regulated as if they were. And the fact is that they don't want to be banned from doing business in Germany, which would be the ultimate punishment for a social platform that didn't obey the regulations with regard to something like privacy or news content. I mean, these guys are getting used to paying billion-dollar fines in the EU because those guys are relatively serious. All right, shall we move on? I will mispronounce this name, but I'll try. Daljinder. Is Daljinder here? He was asking about a community-based WordPress theme or community platform for community news. Looking to create a platform as a seat community, place where we can post what's happening, blah, blah, blah. Well, I would say, and then I'll turn over to you, everybody else, but I would say that that's got to be one of the areas where there's got to be a lot of choice. Partly because community websites are popular, number one, but number two, a community site is just a slightly specialized form of membership site, isn't it?
A sort of membership site, Robin. Not really not looking to earn money from the membership, more of a community-based.
No, membership only meaning that the people you want to support a group of people doing something collaboratively or making contributions. So it doesn't mean that you're selling anything or whatever. Just membership just means you want people to sign up and participate.
That's right.
And signing up meaning, have an account, post stuff. I mean, anonymous posting generally doesn't work. So that's why they're members and not just random anonymous users.
That's right.
You develop a feeling of community much better with identified people. And also bear in mind that there are other mechanisms that come to the WordPress world, like forums and other things, which are group collaboration sort of vehicles. So you could have a membership site and then have a forum attached to it so that people could discuss topics as opposed to just post and then have, categorization or tags to say, well, here are 3 posts on this festival or this travel deal or whatever. Anybody have any particular experience with community sites from the point of view of a good plugin? Or I guess we can't really talk about the alternatives to WordPress, but there are, you know, like Wild Apricot, for example, which I have had some involvement with years ago, is for associations and community groups.
Send the transcript. Which menu? Show captions, and that's it. Here we are. Full, beautiful transcript. I think we're now ready to roll.
Who's this talking?
Okay. Ron says he has a problem on his site in the chat window. Ron, are you here? Yep, I am. Can you hear me? Yes, I can, Ron. How are you tonight? I'm very well, thank you. And I greatly appreciate some weeks ago when you also helped me with my website. It's valuable, your help. So, come again because there are another issues. Yes, you're welcome to return and go for another question answer, solve my problem sort of thing. This is, I'm looking at your site now, investingforthesoul.com, correct? Right, yeah. Right. Okay. So if you look at the...
This sounds like a recording from one of our sessions a few months ago.
Yes, and so I just muted that because as we watched Owen, if he was speaking because his mic was on, that was not syncing with him. So it was like some other source. So I think you're right, Drew. And let me just see. Right. Anyway, so if somebody's muted now and wants to unmute, just raise your hand or indicate. We had that sort of weird interlude, but it seems to be off now. Nithya, were you asking something or making a comment?
No, I just wanted to know if I add the link of another blog. Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I'm blogging one thing and if I want to add a link of the other blog into this the blog which I'm working, it is getting displayed in the comment section. Is it normal or mistake I'm doing?
What, to put a link to something else in your blog post?
Yeah, if I'm writing a blog about something and I want to add a relevant
I would say that's half the reason people read a blog post is to find links to further information. And so definitely, yes. I think when you get to, say, incorporating 90% of the content of somebody else's blog post, then, you might be sort of on thin ice, but everybody's quite casual about using one another's content, especially if you give credit for it.
Yeah.
So if I were you, I would feel free. And if anybody has a problem and says, "Oh, well, that's like my copyrighted content," well, say, "Hey, great, I'll take it out, or I'll change it, or tell me what you want, and I'll do it."
Okay.
And then how can anybody be upset with that? I mean, it's not like 10,000 people are going to read your blog post.
Yeah, right, correct.
I mean, if you're starting out and 5 people read it, then nobody with a copyright is going to care.
Yeah, right, correct.
Because you get killed in terms of the effort required just to even contact you. All right, so
Kate had a question about a content security policy error on a WooCommerce site.
Well, that's a very sophisticated level of security, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so what's happening is that some plugin or something is trying to run a script from a different site. Now, that can happen legitimately. For example, Google Analytics does that. Google Analytics runs scripts from google.com to do your analytics. Or it can be somebody doing something nefarious. Kate, I'm going to ask you if you have any plugins installed that specifically manage content security policy, like the Content Security Policy Manager plugin.
I didn't do anything yet.
Could you show us sort of how you learned about the CSP problem? How was that? How were you notified or informed?
I can find the, error message on the browser.
So when you're editing something or in the dashboard or in the WooCommerce plugin or what, where?
I didn't do anything actually. I just put
Is there any
the
chance you can
plugin.
show us what the error message was? I mean, you didn't have to make a screenshot or something of it, did you?
Actually, I cannot take this site because it's on development right now. So
No, but if you display the page with the notification or the error message on your machine now, then you can click that green button and just share the view that you have of that page so we can see the error message itself. That's all.
It's kind of I can provide right now. I didn't prepare it. I can just can say it's like extension move the Stripe plugin.
Sorry, the name of the plugin is what? Can you spell it?
Kate, you've muted yourself. You need to unmute.
So I can just look at the JavaScript, like preloading JavaScript on my WooCommerce site.
Are you able to identify the script that's in question here?
I cannot because I cannot take the photo of the site right now.
No, I'm not saying do it now. I'm just saying from the URL for the JavaScript. For the script that the message is noting. That surely will provide from wherever this script comes from, will give you some indication of where the problem lies. Which plugin, which part of a theme, which specific template page, if that was the case.
Okay.
Are you familiar with what a CSP is?
I know some of them, but not fully,
No, just in the sense of
right?
Why we have such things, what their job to do is. Are you familiar with? The reason I'm asking is that
yes, I understand.
It sort of helps to understand sort of what the issue is, and you can think of security as a bunch of tiers, right?
Right.
Each layer or tier you put on increases the security, but also the complexity and the cost and everything else.
Right.
So a CSP is up around the third or fourth or fifth tier.
Right.
But you definitely want to find out, whose script it is that's running. If that's the problem. I guess other than that, it's really you could post in a Woo forum.
Right.
There's got to be quite a number of them. But if you were to post the actual error message in a WooCommerce site, you probably have a good chance of getting a quick answer back because In the case of WooCommerce, I would think that's the first place you'd look. You wouldn't even bother with Google. You just go directly to the forum. WooCommerce is huge, right? The number of participating people and sites, and of course it's backed by Automatic, so it's got like, you know, it's a real big time operation. It is the e-commerce giant in the world. So there will be literally tens of thousands of people available to you to answer a very specific question.
Kate, are you able to do a screen share so that we could see what you see?
She said that she really couldn't get it organized for us because I tried that at the beginning.
Yeah, this is the first time to join this group, so I didn't know how to, you know, organize my files. So it's kind of
so
late.
Next time, just know the page that you want to display.
Yeah, so
make
maybe
a
I can take the screenshot for
a screenshot you can drop into a chat message, and then people can open that up and look at it quite easily. Because I mean, by their nature, error messages tend to be well, I think the word is turgid, but you know, dense, technical, puzzles. At least when if you run the debugger in WordPress, and because you've got a problem, and then it prints out at the top a header with like whatever's going wrong. Well, unless you're really experienced, that's not like just reading a sentence and saying, I know what they're talking about. Anyway, I'm just saying to you that figuring out what an error message means takes a certain amount of technical know-how. We aren't that strong in WooCommerce tonight. Sometimes we have people who've done a lot of WooCommerce stuff, or have divi theme lovers and have spent 10 years on it. And other nights, no, nobody divi. You never heard of that one. So there's a bit of the luck of the draw here. Sorry, we can't be more helpful, but
so there is anything about plugin for the WooCommerce content security policy?
Sorry, is there any which?
There is any plugin you can find to fix this error message? Because
Drew, you mentioned a plugin, didn't you?
Yeah, I asked about plugin for the WordPress WooCommerce content security policy.
Yes, but I think, Drew, did you not mention a specific CSP plugin?
Yeah, there's a plugin called Content Security. Content security policy. Yeah.
Yes.
And is it like a general purpose one that says find the CSPs and decide what to do about them or change them or add to them?
Yeah, it just allows you to configure CSPs on your site. I was just wondering.
That sounds like the answer, doesn't it? Have you got the link to it?
Let's see. What is it? It's wordpress.org/plugins/CSP. Well, wait a minute, I'll just post it in the chat. Yeah, rather than.
Yeah, I tried several plugins, but it was not disappearing my error message. And I tried the Hitachi for some coding. It's not, it's not gone. So yeah, the plugin is not really helping.
You used the plugin and it wasn't helpful.
Yeah, it wasn't helpful, and I using some code on the Hitachi, HLS, and I ordered some default code. Default code is working on the content security policy, but it's not safe, so I'm not gonna use it. Default is just the default. So I just want to something is strike permission for my site for safety reason. But plugin is not really good, and other coding is not working on my site.
So it doesn't display all of the CSP headers. Is that
because I didn't put my screenshot or other things. So yeah.
So yes, you're agreeing that it does not display all of the CSP headers. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't prepare anything.
No, I'm just trying to work my
So,
way through here, and it says here easily configure CSP headers for your site. You can have different headers,
yeah,
blah blah blah, and they can be individually
yeah,
enabled, and each policy can be set to enforce, report, or be disabled. So that sounds
maybe.
like it should cover that. So you could send your error message to these guys and say, I have this error, and tried your plugin and it didn't seem to do anything. Is it me or is it your plugin that's the problem here? That's a fairly simple question, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's only 2 or 3 sentences.
Well, that's the one of the way I
You know something? I mean, I had a problem looking for a particular setting to use a particular block. And it was driving me crazy that I couldn't find it. I knew it was there. It had to be there. It just had to be, right? 3 hours later, I've gone through like 15 different resources. And then I find one that's practically made to measure to answer my question. But the title of the thread and the initial discussion would not have enabled anybody to find it because of the language used and so on. So there's a bit of a detective game to searching for answers. That you have to be clever in working out the things you have to say in order to attract the attention of people who have the information you want, so they know that they've got it to tell you, right? So I would immediately go and post in the WooCommerce forum that's appropriate for, you know, it's going to have a security subforum for sure. Go and post there. Send a support query, you know, to this plugin guy, because there's a forum attached to this page where you can go and see. I mean, you really want to search that forum and say, WooCommerce, is there any WooCommerce posts in this plugin's forum? Right? And that plugin, that forum is the WordPress.org forum, right? So it's like every plugin has a forum automatically because it's on the repository. So you've got the WooCommerce community, you've got the plugin guys to say, why doesn't your plugin show this particular CSP that's giving me this error message that I'm trying to fix?
Okay.
I mean, that's really direct and to the point, wouldn't you say?
I think that's work.
Right.
Yeah, I think
And
a
then
good idea.
hopefully a day later you've got the answer.
Okay.
Best of luck. Good luck. Put a comment back tomorrow or the next day, say the suggestion to do X really didn't work or really did work. I mean, that would be fun to know.
Okay, I will try.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Owen has another question about a critical error on his site, which he posted in the chat. Now I opened the site and everything looks fine to me, so I'm not seeing any sort of critical failure error. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
So Owen, are you there, Owen? No, everything looks good here. He's video and it's off.
Here I am. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
What I've been doing that's changed recently is that whenever I try to upload a photo to post it, a photo from like a website, it says that the photo failed to upload, and then I erase it. But whatever that failed upload remains, even though you can't see it, it means it's still there. When you hit the publish button, you get it can't publish because of some error. And I wonder if
okay, just a sec. Have you looked in the are you familiar with looking at the file system where your site resides? Have you ever looked at the folders where the WordPress files are. Do you know where they are? Do you know how to get to them?
Yeah, that's the public graph. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about, for example, if you have cPanel for your host, there's something called the file manager. All hosts will offer some form of allowing you to view the file system. The reason I'm mentioning this is that you can go to the folder in which called media library, and inside there will be subfolders. And one of those subfolders will have your failed upload. So maybe it's a corrupt file, whatever. You just find it and delete it because you know what it is. I mean, you've got it from your media library. So hunt for that file and delete it. Now, if you're not familiar, so in your hosting, there's the file manager, but there are tools for Windows and Mac that are for doing exactly this, but doing it sort of with your own tool rather than the host. And they are using the protocol, which is called FTP, File Transfer Protocol. The utility that I use is called FileZilla, happens to be the name of it. Anyway, I start that up. I point it to a website. It opens up a listing of the directories and files in that website. And then I can choose the media library, open it up, and it often has folders by year and by month, so that you can go to the folder 10 for 2023, and that'll have whatever's been uploaded in the month of October. Mind you, they can often have difficult names to handle. I prefer to quite carefully construct my file names to make them easy then to work with and to be sort in a particular way. So that if something goes wrong in a media upload and it's telling me you can't work with the media library for some reason because of some problem like that, then one thing to do is just to inspect that media library and see if you can spot that file.
Just one other quick question, because I know there's other people, but is there like a space limit on what you can upload?
Yep.
To your...
No, it's usually who's your host? What's the name of the host? The hosting company that you use.
It's WordPress. I mean,
you're on WordPress.com.
Yeah, I guess if that's who it is that recommended it, it's all. I'm paying one bill to WordPress, so yeah.
But has it got .com at the end of it?
I have both and really can't figure out what one does and what the other one does. But I've got both.
One of them enables you to run your site on your own, on a host of your choice. And then whatever you do with the website is your business entirely.
Okay.
WordPress.com offers websites that work within certain constraints based on whether it's free or the lowest tier or the middle tier or the highest tier, each one of which adds more features. Anyway, typically in a hosting dashboard for a site, there'll be a sidebar. You know, in the case of cPanel, there'll be a part there which has data usage, and it will tell you what data is, or at least how much space is being taken up by the components of the site. And then it will always have the quota that you're allowed by that host, which is generally something quite generous. I mean, generally speaking, you know, the sufficiency of space is not an issue. One problem that arises in my experience and is like totally tedious to resolve is people who use their media library as a kind of place to park images they may want to use, but they'll decide later. I actually did this myself and then realized why my backups exploded in size. And then when I finished beating myself over the head with a baseball bat, I got rid of all those and cut the size of the backup in half. A client whose site I was working on yesterday, I said to her, do you have any idea how many images you have in the media library of your site? And she said, no. And I said, yeah, 717. And you can't, I bet you $100 you couldn't find a single file in over half of them, because like you don't carry file names around in your head, and there's no organizational scheme. So it's just dead weight. But the problem is that you have to find the images that are in use in posts and pages and make sure to preserve those. Well, there are a couple of plugins, but none that are free, that will tell you that here's a list of the images that aren't in use in your media library. And you can do whatever you like with them, delete them, download them, whatever. This method that I was discussing, we're telling you about, using the FTP protocol, file transfer protocol. One of the advantages is that you can download the same files that you uploaded, but you can do it much more conveniently than the media library's user interface allows. I mean, they're just files and folders. Download the whole folder, right? And then you have a local copy of these media files. And then if you have, don't back them up all the time, right? Because what's the point? I mean, you got them locally. I'm not sure if that was your whole question, Drew. Will you help me out here?
I get a little confused sometimes between the iPhone directory and the PC directory, because they're not quite the same. But anyway, okay. Thanks.
Oh, when I just posted an article in the chat with a procedure for troubleshooting image upload issues. This is a known issue with WordPress, and the process, there is a fairly long sequential process for troubleshooting it, and it's all included in the article that I just posted.
Thank you very much.
What in a nutshell is the primary cause of these problems, Drew?
Well, it can be a lot of things. I mean, it can be
but I mean, there must be at least one or two that are the most common ones.
Well, out of storage space, for example, or an individual file is beyond the upload the file size is beyond the upload size for a file. Sometimes image files can be quite large. You can have.
I'm not, but okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if I'd call those issues. Like, it's not an issue if you use up the capacity of the storage. It's like get more or use less. I mean, that's not an issue. I mean, no, I'm not being contentious. I'm just saying that corrupt files, for example, would seem to me to be an issue. WordPress seems to do strange things when processes fail. When I was doing a backup a few days ago, it seemed to be taking forever. And I can't remember exactly what I did, but I tried to stop it. The net result of which I got, fatal error warning. And it took like 5 minutes on the part of a support guy to sort of fix the thing. Because it was something internal with the server, and I couldn't, figure out what the problem was. Anyway, not to take from you sort of the benefit of having found this useful article. I thought maybe a little bit of a summary, just as to here are the things which typically cause problems and that you might anticipate, like file permissions, for example. I can't remember ever checking file permissions before I uploaded something, but that there's a file permission problem once it got there somehow. That makes sense, right? Because file permissions control what can be done with the file, right? Who can do something with it? Is it executable, writable, etc.? Interestingly, folks that happens to mention here using FTP, which displays sort of, a view of files in WordPress. So if you're looking to sort of, what was that guy talking about with that tool? Here is it put to use quite, productively. I mean, if we're going to monkey around with files as such, FTP is the way to go, because you can, drill right in. I guess, Drew, I'm not sure people generally recognize or understand that sort of WordPress has these three components, like the server end of things, the database instance, which means like there's no MySQL's not running on your machine. It's an, blah blah blah, and the files, which are other than the ones that we can affect with our content, are pretty standardized, right? I mean, that's what makes making themes and plugins work, is that you can predict where things will be in a WordPress website because the file structure is brought by WordPress in the first place.
Yeah, my sense is that a lot of users tend to just look at WordPress as this is the procedure that I use to do things, and without really knowing what's going on behind the scenes.
Right. And unfortunately, in a time like this where we're going through a big transition, and things can change fairly rapidly, it is a tremendous advantage to have some background in the series of changes over time and have a feeling for the way that the changes are taking place, so that when you don't find something where you expect it, you have a bit of a hint or clue from that experience as to how to go about figuring out, like, because the documentation is hard to keep up to date when something is changing fairly rapidly, right? Thanks, Robin. You have already answered my question about the graphic that is sourced back to WP folder. Right. That was Tony.
Yeah, that was all about that bulging media file business. That answered, that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Now, I'm just looking at this one here. Send an email with an embedded graphic that's sourced back to WP Media folder. In other words, you want the image to come from that folder?
Yeah,
because like that's a really bad practice generally.
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting.
I mean, to give WordPress work outside of WordPress altogether.
Well, I'm looking for a place other than Google. I have this membership on a standalone development system where I can send emails and graphics to the members. And when I source the emails off of a G drive, a Google folder, they get corrupted. So the developer said, well, don't use Google, find another place to get your video, your graphics, and send them from there. So I said, well, I'll just send them from WordPress. And now, well, you can't do that really. I mean, I don't know if that's even possible, but I don't want to, I'll find another way to source.
Well, I don't see why you couldn't use the URL that you get when you view an image, right? In the media library, when you view an image, you get a link if you want.
Right, right.
Normally it's provided automatically by selecting it and then saying, okay, but you can get the link itself in any event. So I think that what you're talking about is doable. And I think the real question is, do you want to do it? Yeah. I've been looking at ways to get my images in a systematic way off the WordPress application server. And so, for example, one of the things I wanted to be something cheap, so I could just say to anybody, we'll open up an account at this place, it's free, put your images there, and we'll use them on the site. Anyway, Flickr is one place that's been around long enough. I think it's probably 7 or 8 or 9 years now. And the free accounts have a pretty severe limit, 50 images. But then you read further on, it says, yeah, that's 50 images that are private. So if you don't mind people looking at your images, right? Like, I mean, just viewing them, which they would do if they were on a blog post or email or whatever. But if that doesn't matter to you, public is okay. It's not like people are going to be waiting. Oh, Tony's going to put an image up. I'm going to go and grab it. Nah. It's not going to be like that. You'll put up 100 images. Maybe one person will find 1 or 2 of them to be something worth using. Anyway, if all your images are public, you can put as many as you want in because that's really good for them, right? So that's Flickr, but instead of ER at the end, it's just plain R. Now that's the biggest benefit from that site, aside from the being free, is that it's been around. and therefore the problem of here today, gone tomorrow is less likely to arise. There's no reason why you can't back up images to any cloud service, especially if you zip them up and store archives. Then your chances of file corruption are pretty seriously reduced. But I do worry about Google and all the stuff that it does processing our files. So I don't want to put anything there that's really important. And the other thing is that it depends on whether synchronization is important or not. That is to say, do you want a set, or do you want a copy or a subset of what you have in the cloud maintained on your local machine automatically, so that if you upload something to Google, it turns up on your local machine in the Google Drive folder, on your main partition or your main volume, which is really cool. But that's a standard practice now. OneDrive has it, iCloud has it. They vary though in their ability to control what's included locally and what's excluded. The term in the Mac world, courtesy of Howard Oakley, is that he refers to that as evicting files from the local folder. Like if you've got a file in iCloud, you synchronize that, so now you have a local copy, right, which is maintained by iCloud. If you evict that local copy, then it just tells iCloud, stop maintaining this local copy of this particular file. But the term eviction, what? Once again, it's a term you have to sort of understand by memorizing it, because it doesn't, when do files get evicted? That doesn't make any sense, right?
Tony, if this is a newsletter, you might consider using a plugin like MailPoet, which I think might do this automatically.
What, store them in?
Just take images from your WordPress media library.
What's the name of that file or that program?
It's called MailPoet, and it's probably the most popular newsletter plugin.
MailPoet,
like as in poetry.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't worked with that one. So that's as opposed to an email platform like MailChimp, right? This is an email platform, but it's oriented to newsletters.
That's right. That it's not. No, it's actually, this is a WordPress plugin, and it uses a. You can use a third-party email sending platform or an email service provider with it. And I believe they have a premium version where they have their own email service provider now. Or you can use any SMTP server. If you have a high volume, though, you're better off using a specialty email service provider. Are there many thousands of people on your list, Tony?
No, 50.
Oh,
Just
okay.
about 50. It's very small.
All right, well, that might be a good option for you then.
Yeah, thank you.
So is there a free version of this, Drew?
Oh yeah, yes, the MailPoet is free, and you can send out email right through your WordPress instance and through your web server.
Yeah, because we're not talking that great in terms of
volume. For small volumes that might work.
Okay.
No, 20 minutes.
All right. So where are we at time?
Yeah,
8:10. All right. So let's see if there's anybody else on this list. Is there anybody posted something to chat and we haven't gotten to it? Because pipe up and tell us where it is and we'll read it.
As far as I can tell, we've gotten to everybody's questions.
Okay, I'm just reading Mike's email here, or not email, chat, but chat thing, and he's just asking a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. The donation link for our meetup pages, I'll just copy this thing, Mike, and have a look at it. I didn't set that thing up way back when. That was something that Alex did, and I've done my best to sort of try not to have to do anything. Well, you know, I mean,
Yeah, me too,
all
Robin.
kinds of worthwhile things to do. I'm not looking for that kind of work.
No, it's just I feel guilty not sending you $5, but every time I see it, I'm late and rushing. So after the meeting,
What you can do though, what you can do is in a day or few days, I'll do the next event, and there will be just don't leave it so late, for Christ's sake.
Well,
only $5.
Get real.
And actually, just by the by, we've been using Zoom up to now, but my annual pro subscription comes up before, or actually either on or the day before the next month's event. And I'm just wondering if does anybody here have any experience with Microsoft Team, their Zoom competitor?
I don't know, but
I've done a couple of events where I've been an attendee, and it's aside from being free, seems like decent. What do you think, Drew?
Well, Robin, will the foundation not cover the cost of Zoom for the meetup?
No,
it won't, eh?
No, that's because they know we have left arms, but they don't think we've got right arms. So they give us the meetup space, but they don't give us the other tool. And actually, nobody's even brought that up as an issue. Oh, sorry. Wait a second. I'm wrong. There are Zoom accounts, and you can have them for these meetups, but you have to apply for each event individually each time. And there's only a limited number. So when I read that, I kind of laughed and said, well, that's not exactly an offer.
I've been looking at the meetup site. I don't see this donation link anywhere.
Are you on a page that's been RSVP'd or on a?
I'm looking at the main.
There aren't
page.
any new pages there.
Yeah.
They're all past events.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm looking at the main page with the. So is it on individual event pages?
Mike, I think that's the case, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's got to be. This is the PayPal link on each month's page, right, Mike?
I can't remember. I just know I see it once, typically when you don't.
Yeah, well, that's got to be the meetup, because the meetup page for an event is the only one that changes depending on whether you RSVP.
Oh, I see it. Okay, yeah, the PayPal link, right? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have? Can you grab the PayPal link and give it to Mike?
What was the question? Well,
he wants to make a payment, but he doesn't have the link.
Oh, all right, I will put it in chat.
That was a kind of an obvious answer that didn't occur to me until somewhat late.
Okay. Comment. I don't like Microsoft for some reason. I get involved with Google, but there's a group that validates not-for-profits, tech something or other, and if you go through their bullshit, you get approved, and then they send you this whole host of places where you get discounts like Dell or Microsoft or whatever. One of them is Google. So we have the whole Google package, which includes the Google meeting program, basically a professional level free.
And so how do you get this?
There's a group that you apply to a group, tech something. If you care, drop me an email.
It's called TechSoup.
TechSoup, that's it.
Okay, and where do I get the URL for it?
Well, if you just Google TechSoup, you'll find it.
TechSoup.
Google TechSoup.
But once TechSoup has approved you get about 100 opportunities to do things. Like I've got the last version of Microsoft Office on my computer, not the subscription, and it cost me $60.
Wow.
So it's not free, but
Well,
it
Mike,
is
do
so
me a
cheap.
favor and send me the direct message me in chat with your
Okay.
email, and I'll follow
All right.
up with you if I have trouble finding it, because
Okay,
I could
we'll
use
do
one of
that.
those deals as something
Yeah.
that is just a good resource for practically anybody that comes along.
Yeah.
Microsoft, that you mentioned, used to have deals like that, or at least maybe they're still there. I'm just not aware of them. But if you were sort of bona fide from a developer point of view, man, the stuff that they would lay on you was staggering.
Yes.
Now, mind you, I was running a business which had a Microsoft store in the office, which Microsoft provided an inventory of pretty much everything they had, so we could give it all away to the media. You know, press briefings, press conferences, that sort of shit.
No, I got really ticked at Microsoft when color expensive, like $20,000 printers stopped working. We found out that Microsoft's update program was changing details and shutting down printers that cost tens of thousands of dollars. And there was no fix. There was just no fix because you didn't know what DL had been erased, and you couldn't backdate because then all the other apps would crash. And at that point,
that's the shit.
Yeah, well, at that point, I started going into Linux and doing everything fresh. Anything that paid dollars, I did in Linux because I couldn't handle Microsoft anymore.
You never thought to try the other Unix in the Mac world?
Mac was even more of a problem with people having to buy new systems and new operating systems every few years. But Linux was affordable for small business. That was
well,
really
actually,
the big
you
thing.
don't buy the operating system; it's free with the hardware.
Oh well, except when they update.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that 90% plus of developers that I run across to in WordPress, you know, things like meetups and training sessions and so on, are Mac users, and that wasn't the case 10 years ago. I mean, if nothing else, the fact that, you know, strictly on performance, a Windows PC might be half the price of a Mac equivalent. That, though, means, of course, that your time bills out at around 10 cents an hour, because you can spend a couple $1,000s trying to figure something out over the course of a year with Windows that is built into the Mac and happens automatically.
Yeah.
For example, the fact that my iPhone rings on my Mac desktop and allows me to answer it hands-free on the desktop was just something that started happening with some version of either iOS or Mac OS, because I didn't do anything.
Robin,
I call good technology, right?
Robin,
same thing with if you copy something on any device in your Mac little local network, then go to another device and paste, guess what? It'll be what you copied on the iPhone will paste onto the desktop, or copy from the desktop would be pasted into the iPad or whatever, right? So anyway, I'm just saying that that's a different philosophy that Microsoft has now adopted in the last half dozen years of building much more usable, accessible machines, right?
I just posted a link in the chat to TechSoup Canada.
Great. Perfect. Thank you very much. Have you gotten one of these or participated in this sort of program, Drew?
Not through TechSoup, but I've done it for clients through some of the larger technology vendors that are set up directly with Microsoft and Adobe and so forth to do nonprofit licensing.
Right. Well, we should probably do something with this meetup, because I mean, we're obviously not a profit-making enterprise. We've been around long enough to be, reasonably credible, I would think. And we do have some need for some services like, meetups or Zoom, what do you call it, video, to boot. So
yeah, I was thinking about that. Now the foundation already has got their licenses. You know, they're the official organization sponsoring us. Now, I'm
Actually,
not sure.
no, they're not. They are contributors, and in some fashion or other, I don't know. I mean, there's no ownership in any real sense, but I remember this was a private group that started up originally, WordPress Toronto, and we joined the WordPress world sort of officially by allowing them to pay our meetup fees and voluntarily sort of agreeing to their code of conduct. And then something like a WordCamp is a different thing because you essentially sign a contract with them to do that. And it's just whatever group is organized and accepted by them, right? That's what the WordCamp, there's the Ottawa WordCamp in discussion now. And before they told anybody, hey, we're thinking of doing a WordCamp in Ottawa, blah, 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 they had to go to WordCamp and sort of propose themselves as a group. Okay, so who are you? What's your experience? How are you going about this first phase of organization? And by the way, do you need, our manual, our guide to WordCamps and blah, blah, blah. And they would assign a WordCamp then to somebody for support from WordCamp, the foundation, right? But other than that, I mean, their involvement in the meetup is just paying that one bill centrally. But they, and of course, they can tell us what to do as long as we're prepared to do it, right? I mean, they brought in, for example, another person to organize Toronto events. And the person just arrived one day and we were told, this person is now a co-organizer. Oh, well, thanks for mentioning it to us, blah, blah, blah. So if they treat us like that, then I suspect it'll be similar in the other 300 meetups around the world. They sort of think they run the shop, but of course they don't in reality at all. If you want something from them, you have to follow whatever the rules of the day are. But then that's not so much different than most things, right? If you want to do a WordCamp and get some dough from them, but you can organize a WordCamp without their support and do it any way you like, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Yeah, to an extent, but I think that the WordPress community of sort of vendors and money-making businesses is such that there are a fair number of pretty reasonable people. I wouldn't want to bet my life on it, but I don't think sponsorships for things like good WordCamps are a hard sell. I mean, it's if you're plugged into the community, then you know about what the role they play, and a few $1,000s is not a big deal. If you're billing 7 digits for a decent sized shop. Anybody have a comment or contribution in that regard? No? Okay. I think we've been through everything that's in our list here, and it's like 7 minutes to go to our nominal end time of 8:30. So, Drew, should we sign off or?
Sure. I think unless anybody else has any issues that they want to deal with.
So on this question of Microsoft Team, nobody's got any experience with it. Maybe we'll just try it out. The subscription renewal discount that Zoom offered, it was like, I think it was 16% or something, which seems, given the world of plugins and themes that we're familiar with, we're used to 30-40%. Right? So maybe I have to just find the time to give it a thorough sort of vetting. Maybe I'll just try it for next month and we'll see what happens. If we have trouble, I can always switch back and pay. They'll be happy to take our money.
And there are things like Google Meet and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I guess, there's bound to be comparative reviews, right? Of who's got what features.
Yeah, it'll be fun figuring out a new user interface. I'm just starting to figure out Zoom.
Well, yeah, but they're also apart altogether from those three that we just mentioned. Are the event platforms. Hopin, Hopin, is a popular one for at least 2 or 3 of the online conferences for in the WordPress world. And those are the ones where you get the video feed, but it's also a bunch of websites or paraphernalia about scheduling and the agenda. And, it's an event sort of package that they put together, or platform rather. And so anybody who runs a regular series of webinars or whatever can do that. But Zoom is also itself moved in that direction. So I now get WordPress.org session or event invitations via the Zoom invite rather than the meetup. Now I don't know why they started using Zoom selectively in this case rather than the meetup page, which so it's like 7 or 8 of them will be on meetup and 2 or 3 of them will be on Zoom, or at least via a Zoom paperwork or process. And interestingly, they, when they post videos on YouTube, which they've become quite good at in the sense of dedicated, they change the titles. So they're not the same as the ones on WordPress TV. So they'll try for a sort of a catchier title to attract interest, but the problem is it makes it hard to find something. All right.
Oh,
so,
did I not? I thought I pasted maybe I didn't paste the donation link. Mike was looking for it. Let's see. Maybe I got sidetracked there. Okay.
oh, sorry, the TechSoup link you're talking about?
No,
Oh, right, the donation.
Yeah, I thought I did, but maybe not. I'll post it.
I don't think so, because I can see the one you posted for TechSoup,
okay.
But not the one before.
Okay, there's the donation link.
Kate has posted their error message page. And actually, this was not an error message from the site. This is an error message. Oh, wait a second. I thought it wasn't, but maybe it is. It looks like the Google Inspector. It is. It's got to be the Google Inspector. Okay, so it's just blocking the loading of an inline resource. And so, and then it says a CSP report is being sent. So what does that report say? Okay, and then, so whose code is being displayed? Looks like preload.js. Well, that's WordPress, right? So somebody written in. Anyway, anybody wants to look at that, but I don't think we have, is Kate still here? Kate. Well, her sound's off, but the video's on. Kate says, I fixed the problem. Well done. So what did you do?
Yeah, I think, we changed one of the host to company.
I'm sorry, say it again. You changed?
Host company and update the PHP and just to remove any extension from the browser.
Okay, so no browser extensions.
I think one of them.
Upgraded PHP.
Yes.
And that's it?
And change the hosting company.
Change the hosting company.
Yes.
All that since we spoke last, about half an hour ago. All this has happened since we spoke
today.
earlier,
Actually, today, we got the confirmation from the web hosting
right?
today, like 5 o'clock something, and I just deleted every catcher and plugin,
Right?
and reinstall the plugins and remove extensions. So the error message is gone.
Yeah, that's kind of the normal or a
Mhm.
normal step in debugging process is to move all of the plugins out,
Yes.
disable or deactivate all plugins.
Yeah,
See if the
and
site starts
remove
off without the error
every
message, and then
extension.
selectively add the plugins back in until one of
Right.
them triggers the error message again. And then you know
Yes.
that that's the plugin that's causing the problem.
Yes.
There are plugins actually which sort of offer to manage that process for you, but it's such a simple thing. Like you just divide, let's say you have 20 plugins, or make it simpler, 10 plugins.
Right.
You create a new plugin folder called plugins suspense. In the file system, you simply move the files from the plugins folder to the plugins suspense folder, which means they're all deactivated automatically. They can't load, right? WordPress starts up the site with no plugins because there aren't any plugins according to its way of looking for them, right? They're not in the folder they're supposed to be. So then you take half of the plugins in the suspense folder. Hang on just a sec. What was I just saying? Oh, yes. So you got 10 plugins. So you take the first 5 of them and move them back into the plugins folder, restart the site. Or not restart the site, but display the site. And then if everything's good, there's no error message, you know those 5 plugins are not causing a problem. Then with the remaining 5 plugins, you put in 2 or 3 of them and you see if they cause a problem. No, now you're down to 2 plugins left. One of those 2 must be the problem. So you put one back in, display a page, no error message, right? That way you check each plugin in effect individually, but not by doing it individually, but by doing it in small groups, right? Just making the process more efficient, more faster. Changing your host is a fairly drastic way. It's a problem. I don't think, I mean, well, I guess we don't know why. Was the change in the host in any way related to the CSP issue? We won't know the answer to that, I guess.
Yes.
Browser extensions, I don't know why they'd have any effect on a content security policy that's internal to the WordPress site, implemented with headers in pages displayed. So like, is the browser somehow blocking the, the WordPress page content? I don't think so. Browsers don't do that. That's not what a browser does, right? Browser does its best to display whatever's on the page. And if it has to, following the loosest rules possible for how to display the page. So if the page is full of HTML errors, right, it'll try its best to display the page, guessing here, guessing there, fixing this, fixing that. I mean, that's what browsers do, right? Just try to display the page. That's your job. Oh, I'm just saying that logically, that doesn't generally mean that something internal to your site, which is restricting what is allowed to be used in a page, it doesn't have anything to do with the browser. It doesn't get to the browser. Something's blocking the header or headers and preventing the script from being loaded and run. That's what your error message says.
Robin, I have to get going.
Okay, so
I'm gonna sign off. Okay.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Right. Bye.
Okay, so thanks for coming back and letting us know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And yes, for any of those that are left, Peter, Kate, and me.
Okay.
Good night, all. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Ciao.
See you.